This morning, I get the chance to speak with a man about his new book, Finding Faith in the Field. Hylden, how do I pronounce it properly? This is the book itself. Thank you so
Yep.
much for everything, man. Did I mispronounce your name? Because if I did, I'm sorry.
No, you said it right.
Okay. Because there's a million different ways to pronounce people's names and different spellings. So I just wanted to make sure I got it.
Oh yeah, yep, absolutely.
This is a very powerful book about your life from the moment of this horrific car accident to the point of where you are now as a man, having survived a traumatic brain injury, reconstructive surgery on your face, your family being there for you, and you reconnecting with being a Christian man. Can we go back to the time of the car accident and start with, what or who Ben was at the time? Were you a very faithful person? Were you a lukewarm Christian at the time? And then what happened after the accident?
So yeah, at the time of my accident, I was a sophomore in high school, and I would say, at that point in my life, I kind of lost my faith. I mean, when I look back at who I was, I mean, it was more so just like go through the motions. It was like my parents would, bring us to, go to church and youth group and Bible camp in the summer. But I mean, when I really look back at it, I went to Bible camp because I wanted to meet girls. That was like my reason to go there. I mean, it was a lot of fun. I mean, don't get me wrong, it was a blast and I learned a lot, but it was always for a side reason, than the actual gospel. And for me though, sports was like an idol. Sports was like my identity. My identity was an athlete. I wanted to play college basketball, and I grew up on a dairy farm near Park River in North Dakota, and so working on the farm would cause a lot of strife between me and my parents because I just didn't want to be milking cows. I mean, not many people do, but it's just like I was born into that family, and I gotta help. I just That's part of the gig there, and I wanted to be playing sports, lifting weights, and there were things in my life that happened, with my grandparents dying, who I was super close to. My grandpa actually lived on the farm, and so I mean, I saw him every single day. When he passed, my faith kind of really took a tumble. And then with sports bred arrogance and pride, and when I was, a little kid, I had a really strong faith. I was a joyful faith. And at the age of 16, I had lost all that joy because sports and trying to fit in, trying to follow the world took over my entire life. And yeah, it was a day, it was April 6th, 2007. That was the day that my life changed. And I guess a slow but sure process happened, where I was brought back to what's truly important. So on that day, I was going into back therapy in Park River, and I took a back road. I'd always take that road when I was late, and that day I was late again, and it was actually Good Friday, so there was no school, thank gosh. So my little brother Andrew was not with me that day in the vehicle, and I'd never lost control of my car in my entire life, but that day was different. It was my grandpa's old car, and it would always speed up by itself sometimes. And on that day, it sped up on ice, and that's when I lost control of my car. I then went down the ditch, hit an approach, flipped my car into a field numerous times. Wasn't wearing my seatbelt, got ejected out the passenger door, and went face first in the field. And that was when my face made impact, that was when I knew my life was now different. I mean, my face shattered, all the bones in my face, my nose in the nine pieces. I broke my palate in half, had the brain injury. And then, as I laid there in the field, it was realizing this is the end of my life. And the reason why is because I knew where I was. I knew what road I was on, and I knew that no one drives down this road. Like, I take this road when I'm late. And plus, it's in April. I mean, that road isn't even open really until like May, when all the snow melts and everything. I mean, no one is going to take that road. And I just knew that I would die out there. And as I was laying there, I was slowly suffocating. What I didn't know is that I had bit through my tongue in my accident, and I was swallowing all that blood. It was going into my lungs instead of my stomach. And so I laid there, assuming that I'm gonna die, and my eyes are swelled shut. I can faintly hear anything. And I'm just thinking about how I treated my parents, how I lived my life, wishing I could see my parents one more time to tell them I love them before I died. And as I'm laying there, I first heard a woman's voice faintly. Didn't know who she was, but in my own mind, I knew she was trying to help me. And then I heard a man's voice about a few minutes later. And so I called them the two nice people in my mind. And it turned out those two nice people ended up being the two people that I was wanting to get to. My parents found me that day in the field. They left 5 minutes after me. They had no idea that I was in an accident, because I mean, they thought I went into back therapy, and they took that same road that I took that day. And they don't ever take that road. The only time that road is used, if my parents are on that road, is if they're planting crops or they're bringing cattle to pasture, or from pasture back to the farm. And neither of those were going on. So for them to take that road was absolutely impossible. Why would you ever take the road, especially 5 minutes after me, and then they come upon my accident just randomly. My mom comes out. She couldn't recognize me at first because my face was so distorted and full of blood. And then she got this coat, and she felt it, and she couldn't even recognize the car, whose car it was, because it was so totaled. And then she put the coat on me, and she looked down and saw my feet, and my shoes were ripped off in my accident. And like, I'm sure like any mother, you would probably know every part of your kid because you raised them. And she knew those feet. And that was when it hit her that this was her son in front of her. And then my dad came. She told my dad that this was me, Ben. And that was when I received my first prayer from my parents. And, there was a moment where, as they were holding me, I knew that I was going to die still. And so I took what I thought was my last breath in this life. And it wasn't until later on in life I actually remembered what I experienced during those few minutes that I wasn't breathing. And so, which we'll hopefully get to later if we have time. And so obviously did come back. I started breathing again. The ambulance came. I was then brought to All True Hospital in Grand Forks. Had severe injuries, like I said, about my face being shattered, my brain injury, but then I had my lungs, pancreas, liver, and kidneys were all bruised and bleeding. I broke 6 ribs, and the artery in my right leg was crushed. So at this point, I was supposed to lose my right leg. I was supposed to lose parts of my organs. And if I did live somehow through all the injuries, I was supposed to, this brain damage was supposed to affect me for the rest of my life. I would never be normal ever again, they said, a very, very small chance of that. And so they did surgery first on my organs to see how much of each organ they had to take out and cut off. Now, this is where the doctors, they don't understand, some of the things that happen in the hospital that day, where they can't put a medical reasoning on it, where the test showed that my organs were bleeding and bruised, and then they actually opened me up to see them in real time, and they just simply weren't bleeding and bruised anymore. And I kept all of my organs, didn't lose any parts of them. I'm in a coma. This is all secondhand from the doctor's notes that I've read, and from the doctors themselves, the nurses. And it's just, to me, it's just mind-boggling, seeing the notes and how bad it was, but then they didn't cut out anything because they just weren't as bad as the initial test showed. So then they're closing me up, about to do leg surgery to try to save my leg, but then my lungs collapsed and I was gone then for a second time. That was in a span of maybe 4 hours. And the doctors and nurses forgot to take away all the air from around my lungs when they opened me up and closed me again. That air pressed against my lungs so hard that it made my lungs then collapse. And the doctors told my parents at that time I was gone for around 5 minutes, and they did not think they could get me going again. But then they had one last idea to put in tubes, and so they tried it and it worked, and I came back to life. I mean, just pure miracle. I know I had a lot of praying for me. That's the only way I can understand, how this all played out, as to God simply answered prayers. And unfortunately, the doctors told my parents that I had less than a 5% chance to live through the next 3 days. So by Easter, I would be dead, essentially, because my lungs would have to swell up. And they said, when they swell up, I'll suffocate and I'll die. They won't be able to pump anymore, and I'll die. But during those next 3 days, up to Easter, they never swelled up. And that, in the doctor's minds, when I, kind of interviewed them, asked them questions, I actually did a story with the 700 Club about 5 years ago on this actual miracle in the hospital. And the doctors, like my doctor, his name was Dr. Charette, and he does not understand. He just said it's medically not possible for my lungs not to swell up, but they didn't. And I lived, and I kept going and began to rapidly heal to a point where I was actually out of the ICU in 6 days. And so by the next Thursday, I was in a normal room. It was room 402. And that's where I began to come out of my coma.
Wow. Thank God for all of this, man, and that you're able to share this story with us. Let's go back to the field for a moment. You get thrown from the car. You have the traumatic brain injury. Your face needs reconstructive surgery. Your organs are damaged. Your ribs are broken. You're in the field, in the ice, and at some point, do you either in your heart or in your head call out to God because you can't physically speak? Do you hear a voice, whether you think it's the Lord himself or his mother, the Virgin Mary? Do you even ponder, why me, God? Like, I'll give an example for the why me, God. Megan Rappaport, who is a soccer player. She's an advocate. She's a staunch atheist. In her very last soccer game, she had a knee injury, and she said, "See, there is no God, or else why would he let me be injured on my way out?" And to people of faith, sometimes look at that and go, "No, that is God's way of saying you should have left earlier." Did you have one of her moments of, why me, God, or there is no God, or did you instantly call out to the Lord?
Actually, neither. When I was in the field, I never cried out to him, and that's where my faith was. That even in my time of greatest need, it was just like I had forgot about him, because I was so preoccupied in my life with sports and myself and just things of the world, trying to fit in with the world. And when I'm laying there, one of the things that I do remember, it was like he was teaching me, but I didn't understand it was him. I didn't hear a voice when I was, alive. I mean, I had a near-death experience, but I didn't remember that till later, college, where I had a flashback of that. But when I was in the field, one of the things I did realize when you're, I mean, I'm not sure if this is for everybody, but I can attest to it, is that when you're that close to death and you know you're going to die, you know what's important now. Oh, you know, like it comes full circle, full force on you, where you, all the things, how you lived your life. For me, at that moment, realizing all the trophies I had in basketball, all the awards I won, all the things I did, all the weights I lifted, what does that mean? In the very end, is that going to get you anywhere? No. But how I treated people, that means something. Like how you love your neighbor, how you treat someone like a stranger. I mean, how you help the poor, how you help. I mean, when I say poor, that can mean anyone, poor in spirit, poor financially, poor of anything. How do you interact with people? And when I was young, I mean, I would say that I was on the right track more than I was when I was 16. When I was 16, I judged life by sports, by athleticism. It was a delusion, an absolute delusion. And it wasn't even why me, honestly. It was just I I wish that I'd done it different, and I wish that I'd treated my parents better. Those are my thoughts in the field, because it was like it all came, my whole life came in a flash, and I understood, what's truly important. And it took a while when I came out of my coma to really live, the way that he was trying to teach me. It wasn't like an immediate thing where I just was, now I finally got it, and it was, on the right track all the time. I mean, and it never really will be. It's more so like we always kind of stray off a little bit, because that's our nature. But he always brings us back to show us that he is God. And that's when you go either through trials or hardships. I mean, speaking on that soccer player, one thing that she's never experienced, and I hope she does, I hope that she realizes this, is that when you're at your lowest, when you're at your darkest, those are the times where that's when God becomes, like, when you see him the most clearly. Because in my life, I have never learned one thing in my entire life, because when things are going great, going good, you don't learn anything, because you don't need him at that moment, even though we still do truly, but you think you don't. But when things go bad and you're weak and you can't do anything, that's when you're made complete, because you're weak, he's strong, and that makes you into that perfect person, spiritually, where when you're weak you become strong, and that's your faith. And so I hope that one day she can realize that is truly, more than likely, his way of maybe trying to reach her, where she becomes humbled, where she has an injury, where I had many injuries, and it humbled me. I mean, I would say the moment that I was the most humbled was when I walked for the first time, because I tried out, I always collapse after my accident, because I lost 40 pounds in like a week. I lost all my muscle, every ounce of fat. I had a huge gap in my teeth, and I didn't know it until I went into the bathroom and I walked for the first time, and I just wanted to see myself, and I had no idea how skinny I was. And I was a good athlete, and so losing 40 pounds of muscle and all your fat, and I looked in the mirror, and I'm just a skeleton, just a complete skeleton. Like, it made me cry, because I didn't recognize myself. And then I smiled, and I had this huge gap in my teeth, because my palate broke in half, so it split my teeth open, and it was crazy, and just to see myself and understand that this is reality, but it makes you understand what we truly are. We're not indestructible. I mean, we're the farthest thing from it, and we can break, But usually when you break and you're broken, that is when God picks you up, and he's the one who brings you back to life and revives you.
Take us back to that first step, because obviously you'd stand, you'd collapse, and then you could finally start walking again. Did it feel almost, has your faith been restored at this point, or are you still going through that struggle of, let's just get back to where I can function? And reflecting on it now, does it feel like God telling you to pick up your bed and walk because your sins have been forgiven, like the paralytic that was lowered through the roof?
At that point, yeah, I was slowly realizing the miracles that had happened. I mean, one of the things that really hit that my parents found me. That was, I just couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe when I came out of my coma and they told me everything, because I mean, I hadn't remembered my accident yet at that point. I had no idea where I was, what was happening, and I was like, that is insane that you guys found me, as that, and then it started to, you started to go down the right path, where just that little bit, but it wasn't like my faith was restored at that point, because my mind, when I came out of my coma, was still set on sports. It was still set on wanting to come back to play basketball. I hadn't got to that point yet where I finally realized what was truly important, and realized that sports is just a small part of life. It's a fun thing, but it's just a small part of life that you can do for fun. And it's not a bad thing, but once you idolize it, it becomes bad. It becomes unhealthy. And I would say it was a long haul, where there were times going forward where, going through the therapy, the rehab, God was really showing me him through me doing things that I thought, or that I was told were impossible. I was told I couldn't come back and play basketball the very next year. And my whole goal was to come back and play in 9 months. But I was told, you shouldn't even try. But I was just simply driven. And there was, right away out of my coma, I knew there was something different. There was something different inside me, but I didn't know what it was. I hadn't understood or realized what it was inside me, but there was a fire and inspiration. It was a strength that I didn't have before my accident, where it was different. It was foreign to me, and it was carrying me and driving me to never ever give up, and to overcome anything in life. And so that's what really drove me. I mean, my mom was a huge motivator for me too. I mean, she's the perfect definition of tough love, where she loves us as, her children dearly, but she's also tough when she needs to be. When, for me, I mean, there was a part of me, my flesh, what it wanted to do every single day was pity myself, feel bad for myself, say, why me? In the field, I didn't have that. But when I came out of the hospital and I was out of my coma and at home, oh, there were days where I just wanted to sit there and cry for myself, that, to feel bad for myself, that life isn't fair. And then there's moments where you want to be mad at God and at life, and just, because those are the moments you wonder, why me? But it's during those moments when he picks you up and he keeps leading you, and you keep going, then you realize that something is truly carrying you, And so when I came back to play basketball the very next year, there were moments throughout the summer where I was running in June. My accident happened in April, and I was sprinting in June. That was the first moment that I really questioned, like, this has to be God. This cannot be me. I wasn't supposed to be sprinting until, like, at least at the earliest August. And I'm like, how am I this is impossible. And that was when I started to really question, that this has to be God. And I'll put it into a nutshell. Throughout the next few years, it was an up and down battle. You know, it was just a battle. For me, it was to find out what's actually important. I didn't realize that was a journey I was on. I thought the journey was to play basketball again. But through it all, you know, I had a lot of setbacks, a lot of hardships. I did come back and I did play basketball, but it never lasted because I get a concussion, or I would get severe tendonitis in my muscles from overdoing it, from overworking them. Or in the first year back, I got elbowed in the nose in a game. I got a bloody nose, and that triggered post-concussion syndrome, which the doctors they didn't diagnose it until months later. They didn't know what it was, but what it did was it set me back. I lost 30 pounds again. I had to quit basketball, quit school. My life was back to shambles, where I was back down to nothing, and I didn't understand why. And that's where you know, my mom would tell me from day one that God has a plan for me. And I was like, man, this doesn't seem like a good plan, because all I ever do is get injured. All I ever do is get set back, and I work and I work, and I'm motivated, I'm inspired, and then it's gone. It's gone again. And you know, the amount of work I had to do, the amount of pain, and then for it all to be taken away just in a second. I just couldn't understand, how could this be God's plan for me? And then, you know, you go back to that soccer player. You know, there were many times where I would just question, how in the world could this be a plan of God? But his ways are so wise to teach us lessons in life. You know, this is, for him, it's not about in the moment. It's the bigger picture throughout life, you know, way in the future. You know, he's planting seeds, he's teaching us things that we don't even know yet. But then we realize later on in life that that's why I went through that. And so going through all that and coming out the other side, where during that time of the post-concussion syndrome, I was so close to suicide, because I didn't understand my own life. You know, it was a moment at my darkest. And then once again, he brought me out of it. He inspired me to keep going and to not kill myself. And it was something for me, you know, through all those things. And it was 2 years later, I actually had my last shot to play basketball and to win a state championship. That was my goal since I was 4 years old. But I quit. I quit basketball, but I quit for something that I believe that I had a bigger and more important purpose in life than just basketball. And I didn't know what it was, but that was when my faith began to take off, where, you know, the doctors told me that if I got one more concussion too soon, it may damage me mentally for the rest of my life. And I quit basketball for what I'm doing now. I didn't know it at that time, but this is what that bigger and better thing is in life. And so, yeah, it was an up and down battle, you know, and I think for any human, I mean, any human testimony, everyone has their highs, everyone has their lows. I truly embrace the lows now, and they're not fun going through them, but if you learn and you understand that God he is truly real, and you lean on him in those times, you know, those are the times you truly understand his nature. You get to know him, you know who his true identity is. And those are the times that I cherish. I truly cherish the times when I've been at my lowest, when I look back, because I'm like, man, that was when I knew you the best, because that was all I had. That was all I had.
Ben, before we get into what you're doing now, I hope this isn't too personal of a question. You know, I've had a couple of concussions, and every once in a while, I'm still very sensitive to light, and I get, you know, some headaches here and there. Do you still have those problems post-concussion, where every once in a while, you know, the sun will hit the snow just right, and then, you know, the headache will come, or, you know, any dizzy spells or anything that you know, concern you still at this point?
The thing that my injury actually does is it actually affects the right side of my body, and so it affects the neuroplasticity, so the brain muscle connection on my right side. And what I've learned is, you can, my job now requires a lot of traveling. I travel a lot for speaking, and which is, traveling is always fatiguing, where it makes you tired and it's tough to do. And especially with my brain injury, I can do it, but I got to take care of myself. Thankfully I don't get headaches, I don't have any sensitivity. I get fatigued if I eat the wrong foods, if I don't get enough sleep, if I don't take care of myself. Then it's so weird that my right side, my right eye, my right ear, my muscles don't work the way they should. They still work, but they don't work correctly like my left does. And so it's a weird thing, but that's where you ask God. I need wisdom. I need help. I need you to lead me in what to eat, how to take care of myself. For this situation that I'm in, I need help. And so he's helped me a lot, to understand what I got to do to be the best person I can be, my best self. And my best self every single day is to find Christ, to live in Christ. And it's always a challenge, as in this world, because you're surrounded by things that is, this world, the way of this world is opposite of God. And so we're surrounded every single day. So to live the way I should isn't always the easiest, as far as food also. I mean, it's tough to break habits. It's tough to stop eating things that you ate all the way growing up that you love, but that I have a mission, I have a purpose, and I want to be a light. I want to be a light to people. I truly want to. The best way that God's taught me to share the gospel is to live it out yourself, to live it out, that you live in spirit, that you live through the Holy Spirit, you become a light to other people and make them question, why is he like that? To make them ask you, why do you do what you do? Why do you live the way you do? And then you can tell them, who is leading you, what things you do. And so, I mean, for me, that's where it all comes from, the inspiration to want to live this life the way I do. But yeah, it's definitely a challenge, though. I'll say that it's not easy, but like we said earlier, the challenge is, that's where you need God. When you go through hardship and you're struggling, that's where God makes you strong, because you are weak.
And, just since you're a lover of basketball, do you ever just pick up the ball and just, shoot threes and free throws just to keep physically active?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, I work out almost every day. I mean, my body, it works fine as long as I take care of it. I mean, I can still lift the way I used to. I can do most of the things that I want to do. So yeah, shooting around, I still love playing. I still love, shooting around. I mean, that's something that have that kid joy again, where it used to be like a job, like in high school, it was just stress. It was just completely pressure, stress that you put on yourself. But now it's a sport. It's a joy. It's fun to shoot around. It's fun. I love, going past your limits. So, I mean, God is always inspiring me to go past what is normal, So for me, the foods I eat, the exercises I do, they're not what you would say what I used to do in college, where in college I was all about just getting bulky and big, strong. Now I just want to be fit. I just want to take care of myself, eat the way that God has taught me, and there's a ton of foods I eat that are not normal. I see them in a grocery store, but those are the foods. There was many times in my story where I had setbacks even after those initial injuries, where that you could read in my book, where, I had setbacks where I had another leg surgery. I had a spine injury where I herniated 3 discs. I broke my SI joint. This is all in college. I crushed my sciatic nerve. So those are another hardship, another thing I needed God to help me get out of. And so that's where I've learned about health, about foods, about healing that God gave through foods. And really it comes down to simplicity: good water, good sleep, good foods as far as organic. There's lots of foods that you can eat that you would never see in a grocery store that are so good for you, for anti-aging and to heal from injuries. And then movement. Those are the 4 things that God said, if you do them, those are the things that are truly really important. And he's not wrong. Anytime I keep those in check, my life is good.
Are we getting a Benjamin Hylden book after this based on diet and exercise, like a fitness book or a cookbook?
Well, I got something in the works. That will be in there. That will be a part of the book. And it's cool too, because God, he's taught me a lot about life, and I get to use them now where I'm actually a health coach. And so people will just ask me to give them a nutrition plan. And so, based upon what your needs are, what's wrong with you. I mean, there's a food for everything. There is. I mean, I didn't know it back then, but I wish I would have known back then, because I would have eaten those right away. But man, there's hundreds, if not thousands of foods that no one has ever heard of. And there's foods like my family, would always kind of make fun of me because I started doing this diet, and I still eat normal, like I chicken and beef and lots of vegetables, fruits. I mean, I just kind of stay away from anything processed and try to stay with organic. But yeah, I mean, it's cool now because I get to use all this information, this knowledge that I literally had to learn, because I wanted to heal from my spine injury. And it worked. I went in for an MRI, and my entire spine had healed, and they told me I had degenerative disc disease, and that was cleared up. And so it was to me, it was amazing. It was awesome. And so that's where I love sharing that with people, because people think there's no way out, but God gave us a way out. I mean, he have all these foods that nobody you just don't hear about, simply.
Take us back to your first speaking engagement. Were you approached, whether it was by your church or another parish, to come talk? And how did becoming a public speaker come about for you?
That came out with my book. That I was asked to do a few radio interviews when people started to hear about my story. Now, back then, my first one ever, it was in Jamestown College in North Dakota. And I was asked by a camp counselor when I shared for the first time at campfire. I didn't understand what I was doing. I just went out and shared my testimony, and I thought if I can help somebody, that would be great. And then that counselor asked me to speak at her college. And so I did that. I'm not going to lie, I was scared to death. And I still get super nervous because when I was a kid, I had a really bad speech impediment. So I would stutter all the time. I mean, you can ask my friends, my family, I got made fun of for it because I would always stutter, and then I get nervous, and then it gets worse. And so speaking, man, that would be probably last on the list of anything that I thought that I would do in this life, speaking in front of people. I mean, you couldn't have picked something, that I'm worse at, because I would stutter all the time. But then I wrote the book, in college and started getting asked to come speak at different places. And I was like, oh my gosh,
Well, I'm going to
I
hold you
can't.
right there because don't forget, Moses stuttered too.
I know. It was just when you're in it and you know how scared you get. It's just like, oh my gosh, me? Like you want me, the stutterer, to go speak in front of people. That's what we talked about earlier. My weakness, he made it into a strength because I can't do it. So then he does it for me. And that's where he can use me. And that's where I'm not in the way then. I mean, I have to rely on him. There is no other option. Because if I'm going to go speak in front of people, I cannot be in my own human mind or it's going nowhere. And so that I learned about him. I really truly met him, got and know him because you're just forced into it. I mean, I had no other option. And the same thing with writing. I'm not a good writer. I wasn't born with a talent to write or a want or a desire. But in college, I was inspired from a radio host to write a book, and I'm like, man, I that would be great if I could write a book. But I'm a full-time student. I'm a high school basketball coach. I work at the wellness center. How am I going to find time? Well, when God wants you to do something, I don't even know how. How did I find time? I don't know because I did all that. But any spare moment I had, I wrote and I wrote and I wrote my book in a year. After that day, I was given the idea. I just wrote it down in a notebook. And then my friend, thankfully, my friend Sarah, she actually typed it out for me. And so from the notebook, and that was how it all started. And then when the book came out, I was not thinking the book would do well or that I would get any speaking from it at all. I was planning on being a high school counselor and then a basketball coach. That was my plan. But then I started getting calls to come speak at churches and businesses and schools and organizations and random places. And I'm like, well, I can't say no because I know God wants me to do this. But I figured it would run out in like 6 months where I would stop getting calls. But I'm still getting calls to this day where but as my book is spread, my story spreads, that's where people reach out and they ask if you'll come speak. And, I'm still me. That part of me and it's not going to be gone until the next life. So I know how weak I am at that, in that area as far as speaking. But that's where my joy comes from, is that I don't lean on myself because I can't. And so that's kind of how that all started. And I just never could have dreamt that I'd be doing what I'm doing, but it is truly a joy to share the gospel because I know how it has saved my life in this life and into the next life. Like it has changed me into my new self. I've found what's truly important. I've found the spiritual side of life where you lean on God. And that's really the whole thing I want to do. Is I want people to know that is that you can find relief right now. Like you can escape your stress, your worries, your fears. You can go into refuge with Christ. I mean, Christ is salvation right now and into the next. Like it is something that is so powerful where to find your new self in Christ, and that is overcoming the world. That is finding your new self, not following the world, and being freedom from your flesh.
Let's go into the book, Finding Faith in the Field. On the back cover, you recreate the flipped Buick. And have you been back to the field since the accident? Do you still take that back road in North Dakota and stop and reflect on things? Like, what is it like to be on that road now after not only recovering, but returning to the faith?
And that photo is actually the real photo of my car. a photographer came out and actually got a picture of it after my accident, and I'm so glad he did. But yeah, that is the real picture. Um, that road, I would say, yeah, it'll always be a road, um, a mixture of feelings, obviously, because I remember I had flashbacks of the actual accident a year after the accident, and remembering it was terrifying. I mean, it was really traumatic when I went through it, and I actually remembered how scared I was, and my thoughts and everything. I mean, it was literally mind blowing, because you think this is the end of your life, but at that point my faith wasn't where it should be. It's not like it is now, and so it was terrifying. But later on in life, during my junior year in college, about 2 weeks before that radio host gave me the idea to write the book, I actually was driving down that road, and I was going back from our farm near Park River to Grand Forks back to college. And now, when I was driving on that road, it was like I questioned my own self, like thinking, like, why am I driving down this road? Because I'm actually backtracking. I'm not even going towards Grand Forks. I'm going the wrong way. But on that day, when I got close to the field that had my accident in, I started to just bawl my eyes out, cry and cry. And I no, I had two flashbacks previous. One of me, just my accident, the crash and laying in the field, and then that was a year after my accident. And then my second one was during my freshman year in college, and I remembered what happened when I stopped breathing in the field. For my parents said they thought I had died. They said I was gone for about 4 minutes, they said. And then so as I'm driving down that road and I start crying, it was the same uncontrollable cry I had the first two times. And I'm thinking, oh boy, something's going to happen. Like I'm going to have something spiritual is happening, because I don't cry like this unless something is going to come. And so I put the car into park and I'm like right next to the field now where I had my accident. And I'm crying and crying. And the first thing that I see, that I remember from when I stopped breathing, when my lungs collapsed, and what was shown to me was this man that his left arm was extending, and he was smiling at me, and the city appeared. And the city was absolutely beyond beautiful. It had huge walls all around it and two gates that were going in, and it was all made out of an assortment of different jewels. I have no idea what jewels, but they were crafted perfectly. Like, they were smooth, like on the outside. And the buildings on the inside of the city, I don't know what material they're made out of, but it was like a shade of like white, like a it wasn't pure white, but it was like a shade of it, and it was just beautiful. And
Like a
I
pearl
didn't
white?
see anybody walking inside the city, but then I saw a mountain way in the background and a river going down the middle of it, and then going into the city. And that's actually my logo is actually the mountain that I saw in that vision. And so there's a tree line up to a certain point, and you could see that somebody lived on top of that mountain, but I wasn't told who, but you could see that somebody did. And then from then on, it was like a puzzle was being put together inside my mind, where I remembered up to that point where I was walking with this man, and this man was telling me why my life was being saved, and why I was being why I would go back to this life. And I didn't want to go back. I mean, I didn't want to leave where I was at, because it was beautiful. I had a new body. a new mind. It was harmony. It was absolutely beautiful. And it was to share the gospel of Jesus Christ, and to share my story, and to give people hope and faith, and just to share my my testimony, with the world, and to try to inspire people, and to share Christ. And so for me, it was like I finally knew why I was in that accident, why I went through all the things I went through. Because if I hadn't gone through all the assortment of different trials and hardships that I have, I wouldn't be able to relate to people as well. And I wouldn't be the person I am today, because I needed God every single time to get through them. And that is what has led me to him. That it has made me need him, and why I don't want to leave him, even when my life is good now, where I want to stay with him all the time, because there is nobody else. He is it. Like, Christ is life. And I realize that now. And that's where the big picture thing is, that Christ isn't a guy in a picture. He's not a guy, a statue. He's someone that through faith. We have never seen him yet, and that's why it's faith. And so knowing him through faith, it's a beautiful, beautiful thing, because he is truly life itself. And so that road, especially after that day, realizing, and understanding that what I remembered and experienced, that was when my lungs collapsed. And seeing that was when I was really prompted to share my story, because of this reason, especially, is that I know who I am. I know where I came from. I know how much of a doubter I used to be. And I know that stories like this, testimonies are the most powerful thing for each of us. If I hear a testimony from a real life story, it impacts me every single time, because it's real life. So I was inspired, man, if I can help people like me, where if I can help someone who's struggling with faith, and I can share them my testimony coming from someone who is weak in faith also, then that is something that is beautiful, where God is using someone like me who was broken and a doubter, and now that doubter who was broken is now sharing his testimony with someone who might be broken or a doubter. And for me, it's something that I can relate. I understand how it is. I understand the doubts. I understand why it's hard to believe sometimes. And that's why I love to share, though, is that if I can get through, my story can help someone and break through that disbelief and come into the kingdom of God through faith. That is, I always told my parents, if I can help one person with my story, then writing my book and speaking everything I've been through, that's one soul, and that's totally worth it, all right there. And so that's kind of where everything came from, and how that road, that day was a monumental day, experiencing that and seeing that next life, seeing that city, that it was definitely a heavenly city. I wasn't told much, just why my life was being saved. I don't remember going into the city, if I ever did, or anything. It was very brief, but it was enough for me to, just to want to share it anyway.
Ben, your book, Finding Faith in the Field, is through Christian Faith Publishing. Where can we find the book if we want to purchase it? And do you have any upcoming speaking engagements, either leading up to Christmas or following the new year? And how could people get in contact with you if they want you to speak at their church or at their organization?
So my book, you can purchase my book on my website, benhylden.com, or through Amazon, or through Barnes and Noble. And as far as speaking goes, you can contact me through my website, benhylden.com, and just to contact me about speaking. As far as events go, I just finished I was on the road for a month straight, all the way doing book signings in November. And I just finished my last book signing in Bismarck this past weekend. And so I have a little break now. I got some interviews to do. And that's really about it until the new year. And then my next one that I have coming up will be in Armour, South Dakota. And then there's a bunch around that area that I'll be doing in schools and in churches and stuff like that. But my first one's in Armour, South Dakota. And that will be in late January. And so I get a little break now where I can kind of make my own schedule. And so it'll be nice to get a break and do some interviews on TV and radio and podcasts and then go back out there and keep doing my thing. So, but yeah, I mean, it's been interesting, to see where God's led me, and it's exciting to see where life is taking me now. And yeah, I mean, God, he has the possibilities are endless, as far as what I can become, and as far as things that he's doing through me. I just finished my second clothing brand too, which is called Ajabu, and Ajabu means extraordinary in Swahili. And so that was something that I was inspired to do just through him again, where I wanted to make something that was completely from scratch, completely original, and something that would inspire me. Extraordinary means your new self. That is extraordinary, because you become someone you thought you could never be. And so that's kind of where everything is summed up. And so me speaking, to me, it's extraordinary, because I'm a stutterer, and I go out and I speak in public, and to me, it's mind-blowing, but it shows me God every single day. That is for sure.
Ben Hylden, thank you so much for your time and talking to me about finding faith in the field. I'm going to speak on behalf of everyone in this regard that we are all glad that you are still here. And let me be the first one to wish you a very Merry Christmas. And I hope to chat with you again for whatever reason, just if it's a casual conversation. It doesn't even have to be about the book or anything specific. But thank God you're still around. Thank God you're healthy. And I'm thrilled for the work that you're doing.
I appreciate it, man. Thanks for having me on also. I mean, it's been fun sharing. It's been a fun conversation. So yeah, absolutely. And Merry Christmas to you too.